Thank you, Pata sir. Good evening to all. Welcome all of you for today's case discussion. For today's discussion, I have selected a case of median arcuate ligament syndrome for a couple of reasons. The first one is that we all know that median arcuate ligament syndrome is a very controversial topic. I'm sure as we go through the discussion and presentation, there will be difference of opinion as far as the indication of surgery is concerned. So it's a very controversial area. That's one reason why I have selected this particular topic. Second one is, though this has been described as early as 1963, but interest has evinced recently, especially with the availability of laparoscopic surgery. So for these two reasons, I have selected this particular topic, and I hope that this might be interesting for the discussion. Now, let me go to the case summary. This is a story of a gentleman in mid-50s. He came with a pain abdomen of nearly 6 months duration. Pain was predominantly in the epigastric region and umbilical region. And it was predominantly a postprandial pain. And this pain was not very excruciating, but it was just severe enough to disturb him. That's why he came for a consultation. There are no other GI symptoms. There is no history of nausea or vomiting. There was no history of altered bowel habits. There is no history of GI bleed. There is no history of anorexia. But he had some weight loss, but that was not very significant. There are no comorbidities, and there is no past history of any surgery. Coming to the examination, he was a thin-built individual, and vitals were stable. There was no organomegaly. There was no visible peristalsis suggestive of any interstitial obstruction. There are no scars to suggest adhesive obstruction, and no tenderness, no mass palpable. And he had an epigastric bruit, but this was finding which we didn't appreciate upfront. After the evaluation, retrospectively, when we examined after CT scan, there was a bruit. So this any patient, we always teach the students that you'll have to examine auscultation bruit, but most of the times we miss this in clinical practice. Coming to the investigations, his blood investigations are essentially normal. And an ultrasound abdomen was done, which was once again reported as normal study. There was no evidence of any cholelithiasis. There was no ascites. There was no mass lesion or anything else. Now, an upper GI endoscopy was done, which showed some antral gastritis, and it was positive for H. pylori. So, patient was treated for H. pylori as well as antral gastritis for a period of 6 weeks, and there was no improvement of symptoms. So, because of that, we went ahead and did a CT abdomen. And CT abdomen was also essentially reported as normal only, except that they picked up a celiac artery stenosis. So, I'm not going to show the axial images for you. I'm just going to show you the reconstructed images for you. This is a volume rendered CT angiogram picture for you. And you can see that the common hepatic artery is actually having a trifurcation. It is dividing into right hepatic artery and left hepatic and gastroduodenal artery. So this particular arrangement is quite rare, and this is very important, especially when you do a Whipple's operation. If you are not preoperatively aware of this particular arrangement there, you will be ligating a wrong vessel, which you should not ligate. So that's a point I want to say in this particular image. And in this view, it appears as if the celiac axis as well as SMA are coming from a common origin. But that's not the truth, because that's why you always have to rotate the images and see. It is always said that you have any X-ray, any image, you have to see in under two views. The image will change, or the impression will change. So this is a rotated image. Now you can see that the celiac and SMA are having a separate origin. This is for the postgraduate students. Normally the distance between the origin of the celiac axis and SMA is not a great distance. It will be mostly around 1 centimeter. Whereas the distance between the origin of the SMA and IMA can be a couple of centimeters more. Sometimes you can have a very common trunk. Both celiac and SMA can have a common trunk. That's a very rare anomaly. So when I posted this case, in the Facebook today morning, immediately the answer came. They reported this as a celiac artery stenosis. Absolutely correct. That's a glaring finding there. You can see the celiac artery is stenosed, and you have the classical hook sign. The upper border of the celiac axis is compressed by the median arcuate ligament. That's classically called as a hook sign. And not only that, there are other important findings which I'll just show you in this particular image. There is something called, after the stenosis, there is a called post-stenotic dilatation. So a post-stenotic dilatation is very important. That indicates the severity of the stenosis. Whenever I talk about post-stenotic dilatation, this is for the postgraduate, general surgery postgraduates. I always fond of telling about the cervical rib, which produces subclavian obstruction. And it can produce post-stenotic dilatation, and that can be the source of thromboembolic manifestation. So whenever you have a case in the exam, a cervical rib and digit gangrene, you have to think in terms of post-stenotic dilatation and thromboembolic manifestation. Because the subclavian artery obstruction at that level will not produce finger gangrene. Sorry for digression. So the post-stenotic dilatation indicates severity of the stenosis. And not only that, there is another important finding in this patient. If you see the common hepatic, it divides into gastroduodenal artery. And if you trace the gastroduodenal artery, it divides into right gastroepiploic artery and the superior pancreaticoduodenal artery. The superior pancreaticoduodenal artery divides into anterior and posterior branches, and they will communicate with the inferior pancreaticoduodenal artery of the superior mesenteric artery. So whenever you have a celiac artery stenosis, the liver blood supply is coming retrogradely through the SMA via the pancreaticoduodenal arcade and gastroduodenal artery, and it comes to the liver. So this is very important. Especially this concept is very important when you do a Whipple's operation. When you do a Whipple's operation, before you ligate the gastroduodenal artery, you have to put a bulldog clamp in the gastroduodenal artery and look for pulsation in the hepatic artery. If there is a drop in the volume of the pulse, then you have to think in terms of celiac artery stenosis. But nowadays, with the availability of good CT scan, all these things all the information you can get it preoperatively. So this particular image, you have all the three classical findings. Number one, there is a classical hook sign of the celiac artery. There is a post-stenotic dilatation, and you can see a very prominent pancreaticoduodenal arcade. Normally, you will not see this kind of arcade, which indicates once again that the stenosis is severe and the liver blood supply is being derived through the arcade. So those are all the findings that I want to read for you, and that's the slightly enlarged view of the angiogram. You can see all the images. And I'll stop here and take the opinion of the experts. What's the thought process at this point of time? What will be the next way to go about?
Shankar, before proceeding,
yes,
this is what we see is most often in a radiological, even though we don't suspect clinically.
Okay.
This is more of image-related diagnosis. Because clinically, I don't think how often we diagnose this syndrome, but most often retrospectively we think that this could be a possibility. So what is your guidelines to diagnose pre-imaging or diagnostic, clinical wise? Because this finding, we'll see even some other condition, you do a CT scan, this celiac artery stenosis and post-dilatation is we see quite often.
Yeah, you are absolutely correct. That's why I told this case is a very controversial case, because you can have celiac artery stenosis as an incidental finding in an asymptomatic patients. When you do a CT scan and we try to look at the celiac artery, many of the patients will have this particular finding. You are absolutely correct. But that's why it's a diagnosis of exclusion. It's a diagnosis of exclusion. You have a patient coming with pain abdomen and you have ruled out all other causes, possible causes. And in such situation, this finding will carry some meaning. Suppose you are evaluating for some other condition and this is an incidental finding, probably you will ignore it.
The postprandial pain the patient has is probably due to ischemic. Can you get an ischemic pain? Because you mentioned about the postprandial pain in this patient.
Yes,
it looks like an ischemic pain. Is it possible in a patient with celiac artery stenosis?
Yes, madam, it's very much possible. Actually, the explanation of pain in celiac artery stenosis is there are two theories.
Yeah.
Number one is an ischemic pain, and number two, because of the compression of the celiac neural plexus. Because the general rule in visceral artery blood supply to the GIT is that if there is a single vessel blockage, usually they don't manifest with symptoms. In fact, some patients can comfortably tolerate two vessel occlusions. So, a celiac artery stenosis alone is unlikely to produce ischemic pain.
Yeah.
That's why a combination of ischemic pain as well as neural pain has also been suggested. Bhaskaran sir?
I mean, this fits into the median arcuate ligament syndrome situation, even though it's a male and the age is slightly more than what normally is seen. It's generally seen in women younger, less than 40. And there is no evidence of atherosclerosis in all these pictures.
Yeah.
And classical postprandial pain, I think we'll have to take it as median arcuate ligament syndrome.
Okay. And what will be your next step, sir? Will you do additional investigation or?
I don't think so. If at all we do a conventional angiogram, but I don't think it's really going to be very useful. You will have to prepare the patient for possible surgery, which would be either open or laparoscopic division of the thing. But provided you tell him that there is about 30 to 40% chance he may not be relieved of the pain, may need an additional vascular procedure. That's a problem with this disease.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Ankar, why do you get a post-stenotic dilatation? Is it because of increased flow through the SMA?
No, the post-stenotic dilatation is, I was under the impression all these days, there is a phenomenon in physics called Bernoulli's principle, which deals with fluid dynamics. But unfortunately, the current understanding of post-stenotic dilatation is because of whenever you have a stenosis, post-stenosis, there is turbulence of blood flow. There is a turbulence which causes shear forces on the vessel wall, causing dilatation. So the post-stenotic dilatation is because of turbulent blood flow, because of the stenosis, and causes shear force on the vessel wall. Pata sir?
Yeah, actually, as Ubal rightly said, that we used to see this quite often. Actually, for that matter, normal celiac arteries are very rarely seen with Ruchita's CT, because there in Apollo Heart Center, the CT pictures always used to have a good vascular imaging as well. But a patient who is symptomatic, that is typical postprandial pain, somebody who's thin, who's losing weight, and also have nausea, vomiting, etc. But these are the people we should seriously consider doing something for the. And this narrowing is almost 90%, which is very significant actually.
Okay.
And possibly this is one of those candidates where we should think of treatment in terms of laparoscopic sectioning of the median arcuate ligament, which is not a very difficult procedure.
Okay, sir.
And again, as Bhaskaran rightly says, the chances that the pain may not get relieved also is very much there. Actually, many times we realize that I had dealt with a couple of cases with median arcuate ligament, and they are sort of psychotic. They become psychotic, analgesic dependent, and so on.
Okay. Kannan sir?
I have done only one case, open surgery.
Okay, sir.
50-year-old lady. She had relief of the symptom. Other than that, I have no experience.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Whether Kannan, she would have got relieved from you, that's all. Whether she's got relief of symptoms is very difficult to say.
She got relieved of the pain because I followed the patient for nearly 6 months. She was brought by a hospital worker. So I knew after that, I mean, other than that, I had no experience with this syndrome.
Okay.
Quite often, these patients in the post-operative period will give some sort of analgesia, this, that, and the other. Then I used to think that that is, like in chronic pancreatitis, sometimes post-op analgesia itself will make us believe that. But if it is really, no, actually, it should be proven that the narrowing is relieved, or the pressures, systolic pressure has there's some increase before and after by Doppler.
So basically, it's
also, Shankar, sorry.
Yes, sir.
Also try to do a Doppler and document the flow velocity.
Yes, that's correct, sir. So we have to do a Doppler study next, because basically it's a diagnosis of exclusion. So we have to now know the clinical symptomatology of the patient. Then you have to know about the imaging, the degree of narrowing, the post-stenotic dilatation, presence of collaterals. All these things tells you that it is a significant obstruction. Of course, the confirmation of diagnosis is by doing a Doppler study, where they have shown that when you do a celiac artery Doppler, if the velocity is normal velocity is less than 200 centimeters per second. If the velocity is more than 200, or that is called the peak systolic velocity, that should be more than 200 centimeters per second. That's a diagnosis of. You can entertain the possibility of.
Shankar, I just want to know whether the Doppler helps in confirming the diagnosis, or Doppler helps in the response, or rather checking the response to treatment. Because
both. We did the Doppler study for that patient that showed a good response after surgery.
Okay.
Actually, it's both, sir. It's both. It's one of the preoperative confirmation of significant stenosis, number one. And it also helps in the postoperative period. You can demonstrate the. In fact, if possible, you can even do an intraoperative Doppler and demonstrate the reduce in the velocity.
Chalapati Rao from Vizag wants to comment. Yeah.
Yes. So actually, if we, this is a big debate whether it is, it is contributing to symptoms or not. So if we take the analogy from our cardiologists, they do, something called FFR, that is functional flow reserve, to see whether the coronary block, which is visualized on angiography, whether it is the culprit lesion and whether it is causing pain or it is causing the ischemia or not. So, I'm just interested if such kind of studies can be done in these kind of celiac artery stenosis, some kind of FFR kind of thing, functional flow reserve, and see that is the culprit to cause it. I don't know.
No, what is given in the literature is that you have to do a Doppler study and to assess the peak systolic velocity and end diastolic velocity of the celiac axis. If it is more than 200 and 55 centimeters respectively, and this has to be done in the middle of the inspiration. If it is positive, then it indicates nearly 70% stenosis in that's what the literature says. And after deep inspiration, when you evaluate the velocity, it should come down. So that's a normal. So when all these things put together, only we have to come to a diagnosis. I'm not sure about what you are trying to tell. I'm not even able to whether agree or disagree with you, whether we can extrapolate what is practiced in coronary to this one. And I don't think literature is available. It just tells about the Doppler velocity study only. I have not come across the concept that you are trying to tell. If you can show me anything documents, then it will be good. So this particular patient had a positive Doppler also. So this patient was having everything was positive, clinical symptomatology, and number two, imaging findings, and of course the Doppler study. Everything was.
Anyone else? I think there's somebody who wants to comment. Abhi and Dr. Surendran made some comment about vomiting. Sir, can you come up and comment on or explain what you're trying to say?
Actually, this is one common finding we see in the CT, but very common in young individuals if they have persistent vomiting. We had 2 cases where 20-year-old for 5 years they have been vomiting everywhere, endoscopy, colonoscopy, all kinds of them. And when the CT was done, this showed. So that patient improved. But if you operate on a very symptomatic patient, they symptomatically improve. Otherwise, we should not touch this patient.
That's correct. Because it's a very common finding, radiological finding, which you can get it in asymptomatic patients also. So you have to.
Why should there be vomiting? But there's no obstruction to a gut lumen.
Yeah, the
This
common
postprandial ischemia to the stomach.
no, the common symptom is pain abdomen, sir. But there can be unusual symptoms like nausea, vomiting. Those things can also occur. But the classical symptom is pain abdomen only. Pain abdomen, postprandial pain, and then developing weight loss. These are all the important symptoms.
Shankar, the loss of weight is because people eat less, or there is some sort of a mucosal atrophy because of ischemia?
It's called cytophobia, sir. There is an entity called cytophobia because they develop pain after eating. They have a fear of developing pain because of eating. So they reduce the food intake, not because of any anorexia or anything like that. The typical ischemic pain is because of fear of eating, but it's a $1 million question whether a celiac artery stenosis alone will produce significant ischemia is always doubtful. But that's the only explanation that is given. The second explanation is compression of the ligament on the nerves, because celiac axis is surrounded by celiac plexus of nerves. These nerves can be compressed by the nerves. So especially when you do surgery for this, you have to release the ligament completely, and you have to skeletonize the celiac artery, clear off all the nerves and lymphatics. So what next for the patient is important thing is, as both of you are telling, Bhaskaran sir and Patta sir are telling, it is important to counsel these patients, because just because you have demonstrated some imaging finding and you have had some Doppler study values, you always have to tell the patient that we have evaluated you completely and we are not able to find out anything else. This is the only thing which we are able to narrow down, and we have to tell that we can do surgery and we can release the ligament. It might improve your symptoms or it might not improve the symptoms. That has to be told to the patient clearly, because there may be a significant number of patients who may not have improvement of the symptoms, and they will need additional procedures like angioplasty or something like that. That has been shown in the literature. So your surgery alone can help a significant number of patients, up to 50 to 60%. Around 30% can have not a great improvement in the pain. So counseling should be done. So this particular patient was taken up for surgery. We started with laparoscopy, but we were not able to progress, so we converted. You can see the cursor points towards this is the IVC, and that's the right crus of the diaphragm. This is the left crus of the diaphragm. What you see in the deep is the aorta. And there are two vessel loops, one on the left gastric pedicle and one vessel on the common hepatic artery. And you can even see the origin of the splenic artery here. So basically all the tissues from the aorta to the common hepatic artery, this should be completely released. And complete release is what is expected in this surgery. This can be accomplished by laparoscopy. You can do it robotic, or you can do it by open surgery. In this patient, we did a open surgery, and you can see that finally, that's the aorta there, that's the IVC, right crus, left crus. You can see the left crus has been retracted by the forceps, and the entire tissue at the origin of the celiac axis has to be released. Laparoscopy, you can use a hook to remove this ligament or divide the ligament, and ideally, they say even you have to loop the celiac axis and clear the nerve plexus around the celiac axis. So it should be a combination of relieving the stenosis plus removing the neural plexus around the celiac axis for you to have a good result after surgery. But removing the nerve plexus around this area can transiently produce postoperative diarrhea, which will settle down. So I just want the panelists.
What happened to the patient?
This patient had normally you should not assess the pain relief immediate post-op, because they will have wound pain and all. So you'll have to assess the pain at the end of 1 month. In this patient, there was improvement in the pain, and the improvement in the pain lasted for 6 months. And we saw the patient 6 months after surgery. After that, we don't have follow-up. But for the 6 months, he had some pain relief, significant pain relief. And we did a Doppler study post-operatively, and we demonstrated a decrease in the velocity. So both, there is a subjective as
Do
well
you
as
have a CT image of the celiac axis?
post-operative, sir.
Yeah.
No, post-operative, there is no need to do a CT image. You can do a Doppler study. That's why you need a Doppler pre-op and post-op.
No, that's right. But just for the sake of
Because that we didn't do it. But this patient had a subjective improvement as well as Doppler was showing an objective improvement in the velocity decreased.
Sir, I have a question. Since the surgery was done open,
Yes, sir.
you see improvement in the pulsation once you divided all the ligament?
Pulsation, sir.
Yeah, at the hepatic artery.
No, you'll not have a change in the, because the pulsation will be normal only because everything is supplied retrogradely. So you'll not have you will not assess the change in the pulsation intraoperatively, but you can do an intraoperative Doppler, can be done. And I want all of you to share your, Patta sir, you told you have done a couple of cases. What was your experience, and was it done laparoscopically or open surgery?
And actually, laparoscopy. I haven't done open surgery. One chap, there's no great improvement actually. But there's one lady, one 55-year-old lady, she was quite happy.
Okay.
No, we didn't really follow up with Doppler and all that because we didn't think of that. But this was referred again from gastroenterology, both the cases which I done while I was in Dubai. One patient has done well, but one other patient, we continue to have, every now and then he used to call up and come and say, sir, I continue to have pain. We didn't really assess whether the arcate ligament sectioning is complete. And also, we didn't also, laparoscopically it's very difficult to clear all that nerve, but because, when you're using harmonic in that area, very scared, especially when you're very close to aorta, try to hook between the aorta, and I think open surgery gives a better control.
Yeah.
Laparoscopy is not that simple. As you say, just the transection of the arcate ligament alone may not be enough. We need to sort of skeletonize that area, which is not very easy.
Okay.
We can't exactly make out how that plexus looks like. It doesn't look any different from the aortic adventitia. It's very difficult to sort of skeletonize that area.
Okay.
Could you see this ganglion separately? Have you ever seen a celiac ganglion for that matter?
No, I have seen a celiac ganglion in a workshop where there was a laparoscopic Whipple's was done by Bryce Gate from France. He showed the beautiful semilunar ganglion. That's the only time I have seen celiac ganglion. He was doing an artery first approach. He showed all the structures beautifully, and he showed the celiac ganglion. And he also said that when he does a Whipple's for a pancreatic cancer, he does a neurolysis during that time also. He divides the nerve fibers. So I have seen the celiac ganglion that time only.
No, because whenever we used to, even for chronic pancreatitis, sometimes you want to inject alcohol or whatever. In that area, the lymphatics, some fibrous tissue, some ganglion, everything looks the same. Exactly, this is not a very demarcated structure where you can dissect out completely. Kanan,
it's not a single ganglion, so it will be a group of 3 or 4 ganglions sticking together
like stuff,
on either side of the celiac axis, and it has a semilunar appearance. Yeah.
Kanan, have you dissected out celiac ganglion anytime?
No, I have not seen.
We assume that there is something which we cut there is celiac ganglion.
Yeah.
Chalapatrao, could you visualize the celiac ganglion endo ultrasound? Can you make out by endo ultrasound?
Yeah, I think celiac ganglion can be well made out on endoscopic ultrasound because you are going to have the probe very close to the artery there, and you'll get the best image when you do an endoscopic ultrasound. And US guided.
There again, I wonder, celiac ganglion block is an approximate distance from the aorta, and then you inject whether, because that's how it is done by the anesthesiologist when they do celiac ganglion from behind. From the front, when they do, I know how exactly whether they'll be able to. Well,
even I feel I don't think they are able to identify it. It's only approximation.
Approximately, you inject something in that area.
Yeah,
Telepathy, I think, is both is audio, video, both are open, but I don't know why we're not able to learn.
Other, I think it's all approximation. Even in open surgery, when you go and do a celiac block, you just approximately inject on all 4 quadrants around the cilia. So there's a lot of tissue. You do not know whether it is lymphatic, whether it is ganglion. You just inject in that area, general area, all around.
No, I think endoscopic ultrasound is not an approximate injection because it's a real-time guidance. All other either surgery is blind. CT scan also, it's not a real-time guidance. Whereas when you do an endoscopic ultrasound, you are seeing the aorta, you can see the celiac artery there. You have to basically inject the drug on either side of the celiac axis. So you have the real-time best assessment on endoscopic ultrasound. That's why that's the best method.
Ganglia. You see the celiac artery. What I'm trying to say is in open surgery, when you want to do, you see that you got the celiac artery between your fingers.
Yeah.
You don't see the ganglia separately. Even when you do radical gastrectomies and all, you can't make out whether it's a ganglion or lymph node. You just remove everything around that area.
No, basically celiac neurolysis is done by injecting on either side of the celiac axis so that the ganglions will be blocked.
Yeah, but if you really see any of the anatomy textbooks, they give a beautiful yellow colored, like a chubby ganglion in that area.
No, I have seen. I told you I have seen that ganglion in a live demonstration by Bryce Guide. If possible, I will try to get that video and I'll put in one of the meetings. Yeah.
Shankar, 2-3 questions. Yes. Before surgery, is there any role of any angioplasty or stenting, or as we discussing US guided neurolysis? Because this is again, it is an open or laparoscopy. It is a major surgery. We are going for a disease which is not 100% is going to be curative.
Yep.
So before contemplating surgery, any other thing will do it. Or what are the because in this patient, I think you were very sure that this is possible because of the epigastric bruit, clinical signs, pulled out all the investigations, negative findings. There is surgery is indicated, but what about the other options before surgery? So suppose similar case, if not very classically fits in.
No, Ubal, basically the most accepted theory of pain is ischemia only. The second theory only is neural involvement. So basically what we have to address is we have to try to release the ligament and relieve the ischemia, relieve the stenosis. That can be achieved by 2 methods. One is by surgical release of the ligament, or you can do an angioplasty. You can ask the intervention radiologist to put a dilatation of and put a stent. But the most preferred approach is to go for surgery. And if surgery doesn't relieve the stenosis completely, as Pata was telling, you may not have released the ligament completely because you don't want to end up in opening the aorta or something like that. So if release has not been done properly or incompletely, then the pain will persist. At that point of time, the intervention radiologist can do a stenting or angioplasty. That has been shown in the literature. But there are case reports where upfront itself angioplasties are done. But I'm not sure about doing a neurolysis as a first step of the treatment. Yeah.
Actually, Dr. Shankar, it is not a failure to release all the ligaments. It's the structural damage that has happened to the artery. So it has become a stricture. Even after you release the original cause, the stricture does not go.
That's correct. That's correct. So I'll just go through some discussion of for the postgraduates. Median arcuate ligament syndrome is it goes by various names. It is also called celiac artery compression syndrome. It is also called Dunbar syndrome, or I don't know how to pronounce it. It is also called Harjola-Marable syndrome. Actually, this was first diagnosed this concept was introduced by a surgeon from the Finland. His name is Harjola in the year 1963. And 2 years later, in 1965, Dunbar and Marable once again described this particular entity. Dunbar is actually a radiologist and Marable is a surgeon. I don't know whether I am pronouncing the name correctly, but there are various synonyms for this particular entity. It's now a well-recognized entity, but the only problem is, as all of you are telling, both in radiology series as well as in autopsy series, the incidence of celiac artery compression is to the tune of 30 to 50%, even in asymptomatic patients. So this is where the problem lies. You should not go only by the radiology, because there will be a lot of patients who will be asymptomatic, but they will have this particular finding. So you always have to correlate clinically, and you have to look for other telltale evidence of ischemia in the form of post-stenotic dilatation, presence of collaterals, and then you definitely have to do a Doppler study. Now, that's the reason why, because most of the times it is discovered radiologically in an asymptomatic patient. This will best fit into the so-called concept of vomit, which we always describe whenever you are talking about pancreatic cyst or some neuroendocrine tumors, which you incidentally pick up on CT images. They are called incidentalomas. This also can be one entity which will fit into the concept of vomit, which is an acronym which stands for victims of medical imaging technology. Now, the cause of pain can be two. It can be ischemia or it can be neural. And coming to the epidemiology, it's a female preponderance disease, 4:1 ratio. Most common age group is 30 to 50 years, and usually the patients are very thin. They are present basically with chronic abdominal pain, and the pain is usually postprandial, and it is relieved by positional changes. When the patient is standing erect, they don't have much pain. When the patient is lying supine, they have more pain. Sometimes it can have nausea and vomiting, and significant weight loss will be there. And if you auscultate, you will hear a bruit. So normally the median arcuate ligament usually covers the aorta only. But whenever there is an anatomical abnormality or some change in the normal pattern, in some individuals, this median arcuate ligament will come and cover the celiac axis. That's mainly because the celiac axis has a higher origin. And when it compresses, then it produces celiac artery stenosis. And the important radiological findings is there should be a focal narrowing of the superior aspect of the celiac artery, the classical hook sign. There should be a post-stenotic dilatation, and there should be presence of collaterals. In that case, I showed you the pancreatoduodenal arcade, which is very prominent, and absence of atherosclerosis. Dr. Bhaskaran was mentioning about this. This is very important. There should be absence of atherosclerosis. When you have all these criteria, then you can go ahead and evaluate these patients with the Doppler. Doppler study, the peak systolic velocity will be more than 200 centimeters per second, and the end diastolic velocity is more than 55 centimeters per second. And it has to be measured in the middle of the inspiration. That has the highest sensitivity and specificity. And whenever you have this particular value, it indicates nearly 70% luminal compromise. So Doppler is a very objective way of identifying the significant luminal compromise. And when you ask the patient to take deep inspiration and do the Doppler, this changes will reverse. So that is one of the clues that the ligament is compressing the celiac axis. The treatment, as I already told you, it is either it has to be the release of the ligament. The ideal will be to do a laparoscopic release. If open surgery can also be done, and people have done with the robotics. And as Ubal asked, angioplasty, people have done upfront angioplasty also in some cases. Now, I have our experiences of 2 or 3 cases. I just want to show you some images, sir. This is one another patient who had a...
Dr. Shankar, can I just ask a question?
Yes, madam.
The stenosis you mentioned does not get corrected. So, how does the pain get relieved then?
No, stenosis gets corrected, madam. Once you release the ligament, that is only causing the obstruction, extraneous obstruction.
So if it becomes fibrotic long-standing stenosis, you think?
If it is long standing, then it doesn't get corrected, where you have to do an angioplasty.
That's why the duration of symptoms make a difference in the the response of the surgery to the stenosis.
Obviously, because when you have a chronic pain, the improvement will be not optimal.
Not be dramatic. Yeah.
Yes, madam. So this was another case where you can see the hook sign and the poststenotic dilatation. But interestingly, this patient, you can see the gastroduodenal artery and the pancreaticoduodenal arcade is not well formed or not prominent. So that means that the collateralization is not there, which means that the stenosis is not significant. So in this particular patient, we didn't go for surgery. And this is the case where there is no collaterals. This is the case which I have already presented. You can see just for comparison, I have put a side by side. You can see the prominent pancreaticoduodenal arcade. This was another case we operated. The patient had the classical hook sign and patient had typical symptoms, and we did a Doppler. And interestingly, this patient had another anomaly. You can see the common hepatic, the celiac axis gives only left gastric as well as common hepatic, whereas the superior mesenteric artery gives the splenic artery. So there is an arterial anomaly also there. And you can see the classical hook sign, which we got in this patient. And this patient also we took up for surgery. In this patient also, there was some pain relief for 6 months, and he was having multiple congenital anomalies, and he was also having speech problem. So we could not assess the symptomatology of the patient, but definitely he was, for the first 6 months, he was very happy. So that's our, we have done so far 2 cases of median arcuate release. And when you come to the largest series, this is a series published from the pediatric age group. What they practice is, wherever they had a chronic functional abdominal pain in children, they have a very low threshold to evaluate for the celiac axis stenosis. They go for Doppler as well as they go for CT scan. And in this particular series, they have done 46 patients. They have done 46, it's from United States, Chicago. They have done 46 patients, and the conclusion of the study is that all of them, they have done a laparoscopic release, and the conclusion of the study is all children who have chronic pain abdomen should be evaluated for this particular entity. That's what they're telling. But how many of us will agree with it, that we do not know, because this is a pediatric population. So I don't want to comment anything about that. This is a study done in Netherlands. It's once again a largest series of 46 patients. But this was done by a vascular surgery group, where they have not done a laparoscopic approach, where they have done a retroperitoneal minimally invasive surgery. They place the patient in the lateral position, and they put lateral ports and create the retroperitoneal tunnel and approach the aorta. And they have done the surgery. And once again, this series comprises of 46 patients, and they are telling very good results. There was only 1 conversion, and there are 2 cases of postoperative pneumothorax, which was managed conservatively. And nearly 10 patients, they are not able to achieve the re-establishment of the lumen. Out of 10 patients, 6 patients underwent angioplasty, and they are relieved of the symptoms. So finally, what they are telling is, out of 46 patients, in 41 patients, they achieved a symptom relief, which seems to be a very good result. So these are all the 2 large studies, one in the pediatrics from United States and this from the Netherlands. And apparently, this seems to be an entity which is rapidly catching up. But always there is a caveat here. You should not try to treat images. That's very important. And I think all of us will agree on that particular point, that just because you see a finding on radiology, CT, you should not take up this case for surgery. You always have to assess the patient as a whole, symptomatology, look for all the evidences, do an objective Doppler study, and then tell to the patient clearly, and then go for the treatment. So these are all the 2 large studies that has been published.
Shankar, actually, I have come to believe that abdominal pain, every patient with abdominal pain will have some pain in the brain also. Whether it is chronic pancreatitis pain or adhesion related pain or even gallstone related pain, there's no 100% cure actually.
Yeah.
Many of them continue to have some pain, which we will never know. So I think that segment, that percentage is more in this particular condition. That pain in the brain we can't take off.
Pain in the brain. Nice rhyming, sir.
Jayanti madam should comment on that.
No, I think gastroenterologists are the best person to talk about the brain-gut axis, no?
No, see, this pain for some reason, no. Actually, sex-wise, if you take, no, I think more women will have abdominal pain than men, for whatever reason. And they can't localize it. We don't know what is the cause. Quite often we think, every day we see pain abdomen, every day. We'll do a CT, LSCS, or then, query adhesions. Sometimes you release the adhesions, there's no relief of pain. Sometimes we think appendicular dyspepsia. We do so many things, but it doesn't become any better. So there is significant amount of pain in the brain.
You have probably fan following among women patients.
We are upset, Kanan. Jayanti madam wanted to say something, but she...
Irritable bowel syndrome is uncommon in females. It's uncommon in women in India. That's one of the major observations we've made.
Really, ma'am?
Yeah, it is more in men. So that they say.
Does irritable bowel syndrome, pain is a major component?
Pain is a most important component of an IBS. So that is uncommon it's more common in men than in women. But as you rightly said, I think very important is this nociceptive perception of the pain, and the brain-gut axis has to be addressed. And more important, like patients with gallstone disease, they just have some right hypochondric pain and all that. I think we have to convince them, and we talk to them and tell them when it's actually symptomatic and when it would help the patient and when it would not help. So I think that should be the way forward. Yeah.
Chalpatra, you have a comment? Yeah, Shankar.
I have finished, sir. Only closing comments.
Any other, Dr. Hassan? Dr. Hassan, you want to say something?
Chalapati is saying, but we are not able to hear him.
Yeah, Dr. Hassan, your comments?
Yeah.
Anybody else before we close down? No, if there are no comments, I think that's quite an interesting case. Beg your pardon, sir?
Dr. Rao wants you to read out the comments he's mentioned in the chat.
Okay. Shankar, you can just look up.
He says 60 to 70% cases, endoscopic ultrasound can identify ganglia. So he says 60 to 70% of the cases, endoscopic ultrasound can identify the ganglia, and EUS is accurate and real time, and best assessment, fluoroscopic guided injection is approximate. That's what he says.
Okay.
So endoscopic ultrasound is real time, and he can accurately see the ganglion. That's what he says.
I think that's an interesting information, because we always thought celiac ganglion can't be made out. I mean, you are the only standing witness to have seen one good ganglion.
What will be the prevalence? That's the next question. How many times the CT imaging will pick up? What will be the prevalence average? 30 to 50%?
Which, madam? This particular
median arterial compression.
No, they have. It's a wide range, madam. Anywhere from 15 to 50% of the patients can have some kind of stenosis, but the patient will be asymptomatic. So, and even this has been reported both in radiological series as well as autopsy series. So we should not give importance only to the radiological findings, but clinical symptomatology and Doppler. We have to do a Doppler.
Shankar, this patient referred to a gastroenterologist or a surgeon, or it is your own patient?
Why
you never ask such questions, Uval?
Why are you doing a root cause analysis? You want to take corrective and preventive action.
Yeah. Because most of this chronic pain land up with the gastroenterologist. We don't know what to do. So
Yeah.
I'm looking how to refer these kind of.
But
No,
No,
circumference.
what happens is most of these chronic patients land up with the gastroenterologist, and after some time, when they don't get relief, they come to the surgeon on their own, not referred.
But
No,
this
they'll usually go to other gastroenterologists only. They'll never go to surgeon.
But this particular patient has a typical presentation, no? Ischemic pain, and there is weight loss. I think it's
Yeah.
quite significant. It is more, it doesn't look like functional. It looks
Yes, madam.
different.
And the imaging is very classical. It's a textbook case, madam. Because
I would my clinical diagnosis would be an ischemic gout and evaluation for that, and in that you may pick up this, and therefore it makes it.
the post-stenotic dilatation and the pancreatic duodenal arcade is quite prominent. Patta sir, you agree with that?
Yes.
Especially the pancreatic duodenal arcade, you don't see that kind of arcade, prominent arcade.
Now, is there any case report
I
of?
have just one point to make for postgraduates if they are in this group. Anybody who has got a postprandial pain should be evaluated for chronic pancreatitis, should be evaluated for mesenteric ischemia, should be evaluated for what they call ulcer in the pylorus, not pylorus, what do you call that?
Gastric ulcer.
Channel ulcer.
Pyloric channels.
Channel ulcer, yeah.
Sir, I have a question.
Yes.
This patient also had H. pylori infection, isn't it?
Yes.
So, did you treat the patient? If the patient was treated for H. pylori, did you make it sure before you before you operated upon that the H. pylori has been eradicated?
Yeah, that's correct, sir. Actually, we eradicated the H. pylori and we gave full treatment for that. And after that, also the patient was having pain. Yeah.
Okay.
That was done, sir. Yeah.
Shankar, is there any literature to suggest that vascular surgeons or cardiac surgeons have repositioned the celiac axis from where it was to another area?
Yes, sir. Actually, if angioplasty is not going to help, you can do revascularization of the celiac axis. You can put a graft between the aorta and celiac. So all these things have been reported, sir.
Okay.
But not for the pain. Actually, I distinctly remember one case where in the literature they have shown they have taken up for a Whipple's, but they encountered the problem intraoperatively. They tried to release the ligament, then it was not relieving the stenosis. So they backed out of the Whipple's, and then they did an angioplasty, and then they gave neoadjuvant chemotherapy, and then took up the case for surgery.
Okay.
So revascularization can be done in a. Usually, revascularization they go for if there are two vessels are involved. Most of the patients will comfortably tolerate a single vessel disease. Even two vessel disease also they don't manifest because of the good collaterals. That's what they say in. That's how the visceral artery ischemia differs from coronary ischemia or other ischemia. Patient tolerates a single vessel occlusion without any symptom because of the collaterals.
That is usually for SMA, because if you have two vessels blocked, then there is a problem. If it is one, it either comes from inferior mesenteric or it comes from celiac. But if celiac is blocked, you got only one option, that is gastroduodenal.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, see, if you really look at abdominal angina, we always understand abdominal angina is to SMA involvement. SMA narrowing and the whole small bowel, is into ischemic. But if you take this median arcuate ligament, effectively it is the stomach which is involved, the left gastric. I mean, it's very strange that stomach can have ischemic pain.
That's true. They say something called gastric steel phenomenon. Postprandially, when the stomach needs more blood supply, there is a steal of blood. That's the only explanation that is given.
The stomach has got some blood from above also, from the G junction area.
From the inferior phrenic, yeah.
As Dr. Patta said, I think most of the times ischemic bowel pain we attributed to SMA rather than the celiac. Gastric pain usually does not present as a postprandial pain.
Yes.
If the pain is due to stomach, then it is more of an ascipeptic disease rather than ischemic pain.
And we know that SMA occlusion occurs because of atherosclerosis, not because of these kind of structural abnormalities. Usually, an SMA stenosis or occlusion occurs because of atherosclerosis. And when you have when you have SMA atherosclerosis, invariably inferior mesenteric artery is also affected. So that's where they manifest with symptomatology.
Shankar, you can also have superior mesenteric artery occlusion because of weight loss in that angle.
Yeah, that's one more controversial.
Yeah, I recently had one girl who has been having abdominal pain, vomiting, loss of weight. So we diagnosed it and put her on high calorie, high fat diet.
Yeah.
And once she gained 8 kilos of weight, her symptoms stopped.
Wilkie syndrome. Yeah.
Wilkie syndrome.
The Kannan girls go to Bhaskar also. See, not only me.
I know. I met Bhaskar and I don't know whether he remembers 95. We were in the All India Institute together. I don't know. Bhaskar and sir remembers me.
I do remember. You came.
Oh, there's some secret there which I didn't know.
No, I could see the popularity that time itself.
Kannan, you are critical of that from the very beginning.
Actually, Bhaskar sir, the clinical profile of SMA syndrome and median artery almost similar. Young females with significant weight loss. So when you evaluate for both these diseases, I think this kind of imaging. Any relation, Shankar, between these two?
No relation. Yeah.
Actually, almost superior mesenteric artery syndrome, most of the patients I have some psychological disturbance. You know, if you evaluate psychologically, there will be some underlying disturbance. So most of the patients, I refer them for psychiatric consultation also.
Okay.
I think it's Dr. Kannan. Anybody who has been having problems which goes undiagnosed for a long time will have secondary depression. I think that's common. We can't put it primarily as a thing. Even people with chronic pancreatitis, they have significant depression. I presume anybody who goes around with pain will have depression.
No, these people, they improve. They improve symptomatically.
Okay, no more comments. Shall I close the session, Shankar?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It's a wonderful case as ever. And thanks, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Good
night, all of you.
Yeah, bye.
Good night.
We'll see you again tomorrow.
Okay, sir.